I woke up at 6 in the morning, a habit left over from my working days. 40 years of waking up to an alarm clock have not passed without a trace. My body does not recognize weekends or holidays, let alone retirement. The clock ticks steadily in the silence of my home, reminding me that time marches on relentlessly, even when my own life seems to have come to a standstill. Outside the window was a gloomy Tuesday, typical for Colville at this time of year. A gray sky, light rain, and a lazy wind rustling the fallen leaves on the sidewalk. I had nowhere to rush to. My life had turned into a leisurely ritual of daily chores that helped me not drown in loneliness. After my shower, I made breakfast as usual, oatmeal with raisins and a glass of orange juice. Then I unfolded the morning newspaper, which I still preferred to online news. I started reading from the first page and finished with the last, not skipping a single column. Local news, world events, weather forecasts, ads for houses I would never buy, recipes for dishes I would never cook. I always lingered longest in the obituaries. Many of the names were familiar to me. Colville is a small town, and in my 67 years of living here, I had met a great many people. Each one who passed away took a piece of my world with them, narrowing the circle of those who remembered me as a young woman. At 67, I felt strangely divided. My body was making itself known with creaking joints and wrinkles that multiplied with each passing year. But inside, I still felt like the same Maggie who once danced until dawn at parties and dreamed of a big family. My mind remained sharp, and my powers of observation only grew stronger with age. It was just that now I rarely had the opportunity to share my observations with anyone who would be interested. I sat at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly stirring my long cold tea and glancing at my phone. The last message from Nelda had come 3 weeks ago, on my birthday. A short, "Happy birthday, Mom," with no exclamation point. No question about how I was feeling or how I was going to celebrate. No offer to come over for dinner or even give me a call. Zimmer, my son, called, and I was grateful for that, but the conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. He was rushing to some important meeting. I didn't tell him or Nelda that I had set the table for three, that I had baked my signature blueberry pie, which they loved so much as children, that I had bought a bottle of good wine. Not for myself, but for them. The pie remained almost untouched, except for the single slice I forced myself to eat during dinner in the empty dining room. The next day, I took it to the park and fed it to the ducks, watching them greedily pounce on the treat. At least the ducks didn't hide their delight at my presence. My phone vibrated, pulling me out of my reverie. I didn't reach for it right away. Lately, most of my calls and messages were from telemarketers offering miracle cures for old age or favorable loan terms for those over 60. But this was a message from Nelda, and my heart instinctively sank. "Don't come, just send me a check." I reread the short text several times, not believing my eyes. No greeting, no explanation. She didn't even specify the amount, as if I should guess how much she wanted this time. And this after 3 weeks of complete silence. A lump rose in my throat. I put the phone face down and went to the window, trying to calm down. A young family with 3 children lived across the street from my house. The boys were running around the lawn, throwing paper airplanes despite the drizzling rain. Their father was busy with something in the garage, and their mother came out onto the porch with a steaming mug, probably bringing her husband coffee. An ordinary family, like so many others. I used to think mine would be the same. Harold and I dreamed of a big house full of children and grandchildren, of noisy holidays and leisurely Sunday dinners. But Harold left too soon, a heart attack at 53, when the children were just starting their independent lives. I was left alone without really having had time to enjoy the empty nest. And then the children scattered. Nelda moved to Seattle, where, according to her, there were more career opportunities. Zimmer stayed in Colville, but on the other side of town, which felt no closer than Seattle. He has his own life, his own family, his own concerns. And for some reason, those concerns never include regular visits to his mother. I returned to the table and looked again at the message from my daughter. What kind of party was this that my mother shouldn't be invited to? But her money was just right? A birthday? No, that's still 3 months away. A housewarming? Unlikely she would have mentioned it. Just another party with her friends, all 30-somethings who still live as if they were 20. eternal students with no commitments or responsibilities. Nelda had always been like that. Bright, loud, attention-seeking. In school, she was the star of the drama club. In college, she was the life of the party. Now she's some kind of creative director at an advertising agency. I still don't really understand what she does, despite her lengthy explanations. But every time she called or texted in recent years, it was followed by a request for money. First, it was for a down payment on an apartment, then for a new laptop for work, then for dental treatment. I never refused. How could I? She's my daughter, my flesh and blood. I wanted her to have everything I didn't have at her age. But each time, her requests became more demanding and her gratitude more sparse. Zimmer was different. Calm, responsible, but just as distant. He rarely asked for help, proud of his independence. His wife, Zoe, seemed to prefer that I didn't exist. A long time ago, I tried to be friends with her, but she was polite but distant. Now we exchange pleasantries when we rarely saw each other, like neighbors who didn't know each other very well. And my grandson, Archie, the only ray of sunshine in my life. A 13-year-old teenager who, to his parents' surprise, loved spending time with me. I taught him to cook and told him stories about what Colville was like when I was a child. He showed me his drawings, and sometimes, if his parents were too busy, he stayed over for the night. But I hadn't seen him in the last month. School projects, football practice, and other teenage activities had completely filled his schedule. I picked up my phone again and typed a reply. "Hi, Nelda. Why do you need the money?" The reply came almost instantly, as if she had been waiting by the phone. "We're having a party with my colleagues to celebrate a promotion. I need 1,500. Not even a please. Not even a question. Just a statement. I need 1,500. That means I have to give it to her. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm the sudden tremor in my hands. I had worked as an accountant at a small construction company for 42 years. I had saved every dollar, scrimped and saved so my children could get an education, so they could have the best start in life. And now I sit alone in my house that's too big for one person, and my daughter writes to me every few weeks when she needs money. My retirement account was pretty solid. I'd always been careful with money. But it wasn't about whether I could afford to send her the money. I could. The thing is, I'm tired of being an ATM for my children. Tired of the lack of real communication, of the superficial calls on holidays, of feeling like they only need me when they want something from me. "I'll come over tomorrow after lunch. We'll talk," I wrote in reply, and sent it before I could change my mind. This time, the reply was delayed. I had time to wash a cup, wipe the table, and even water the purple African violets on the windowsill. Finally, my phone showed signs of life again. "Don't come, Mom. I'm very busy getting ready. Just transfer the money, okay?" I felt something inside me break. Don't come. She didn't want to see me. She didn't even want to spend 15 minutes talking to her own mother. Just money, nothing else. Outside, the rain grew heavier. The boys from the neighboring yard had already run home, and now the street seemed even more deserted and gray. I looked at my reflection in the window. Gray hair pulled back into a neat bun. Wrinkles around my eyes and mouth that had appeared from smiling but had deepened from loneliness. Harold always said I was too soft on the children. "They'll walk all over you, Magina. Mark my words," he would repeat when I allowed them to get away with another prank or indulge their latest whim. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was so afraid of losing their love that I didn't teach them respect. I opened the desk drawer and took out an old photo album with a worn leather cover. On the first page was our wedding photo. I was young, wearing a simple white dress I had sewn myself, and Harold was wearing a suit he had borrowed from his older brother. We looked so happy, so full of hope. The following pages contained photos of our little family: Nelda in her crib, Zimmer's first steps, a family picnic at the lake, school plays, graduations. Then came later photos. Fewer and fewer of us together, more and more of just the children or just me. And then there were blank pages. We had stopped taking photos together. When did this happen? When did my children stop seeing me as someone they wanted to spend time with? My phone vibrated again. "Mom, what about the money?" I closed the album and put it back in the drawer. The feeling of resentment and bitterness gradually gave way to something else: determination. I've lived long enough to know that if nothing changes, nothing will change. It was time to shake up my precious daughter, to show her that her behavior was unacceptable, and maybe make her think about our relationship. I won't send her a check, and I won't transfer the money. Instead, I'll prepare a special gift for her, something that will make her stop and think, something that will remind her who we really are to each other, and perhaps help us start over. For the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of energy. A plan began to form in my head, and the more I thought about it, the more right it seemed. I wasn't going to get revenge on my daughter. I wanted her back. And if that meant teaching her a little lesson, then so be it. "I'll send you what you need," I wrote back. And it was the truth. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head and a clear plan of action. The idea came to me in a dream. It had happened before when I was working on complicated accounting reports. My brain kept working even when my body was resting. The attic was filled with dozens of boxes of things I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Photo albums, children's drawings, school notebooks, holiday cards, all material evidence of our family history. I climbed the narrow staircase, trying not to pay attention to the pain in my knees. The attic greeted me with musty air and dim light filtering through a small window. The first thing I found was a large cardboard box, big enough to hold everything I needed, but not so bulky as to arouse suspicion. Then I began to methodically go through the contents of dusty boxes and containers, looking for items that could tell the story of our family. A story that Nelda seemed to have forgotten. A photo album with a worn leather cover fell to the bottom of the box. It contained photographs spanning almost 30 years, from her wedding to Harold to the last Christmas we celebrated together, 5 years before his death. Leafing through the pages, I lingered on a photograph of 4-year-old Nelda sitting on her father's shoulders, smiling broadly with her toothless grin. Her red hair, just like mine when I was young, shone in the summer sun. "She was always Daddy's girl," I murmured, carefully removing the photo from the album. I would put this photo aside so that Nelda would see it first. Next to the album, I placed a stack of greeting cards that the children had sent me for birthdays and holidays. They used to choose the cards with great care, often adding long, handwritten messages. Now, if they remembered at all, they limited themselves to store-bought cards with cliched phrases and a short signature. Then I took out a small wooden box that held special treasures. Nelda's first baby tooth, a lock of Zimmer's hair from his first haircut, friendship bracelets the children had woven for me at summer camp, and children's drawings with clumsy inscriptions saying, "I love you, Mommy." Suddenly, I remembered the day when 6-year-old Nelda broke Harold's favorite vase. She was so scared that she hid in the closet and refused to come out. I found her there, trembling and crying, and convinced her that her parents' love was stronger than any broken vase. Where was the little girl who was so afraid of disappointing us? I put the box away and moved on to another box containing documents, school report cards, diplomas, birth certificates. There I found what I was looking for, a folder with medical bills. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a heart condition. Nothing critical, but it required regular monitoring and expensive medication. Insurance only covered part of the costs. I started saving money for treatment, and when the amount became significant, Nelda suggested investing it through a friend of hers who worked in finance. "It's completely safe, Mom," she assured me. "You'll get back 20% more in 6 months at the latest." I agreed, trusting her confidence. 6 months later, I hadn't seen any money. Nelda explained the delay by citing the economic crisis and problems with paperwork. 2 months later, she reluctantly admitted that her friend had turned out to be a fraudster and had disappeared with the money of many trusting clients. I didn't make a scene. I just started saving again, cutting back on everything except the bare necessities. But recently, while sorting through Nelda's papers, which she had accidentally left behind during her last visit, I discovered the truth. Documents with her signature, receipts, checks. Everything pointed to the fact that there was no friend who was a financier. Nelda had spent my money on a new car and a vacation in Hawaii with her latest boyfriend. I made copies of these documents, and now I've put them in a box. It wasn't an act of revenge, but an attempt to make my daughter face the truth. We can't move on until she admits what she's done. A sudden phone call interrupted my thoughts. It was Zimmer. "Mom, how are you?" His voice sounded a little tense, as it always did when he spoke to me. "Everything's fine, dear. just sorting things out in the attic. You shouldn't be doing that by yourself. I can come over and help you this weekend. No need. I'm fine, I replied, knowing that his offer was more a courtesy than a genuine desire to help. There was a pause, during which I could almost physically feel him searching for the right words. Mom, Nelda said you didn't want to send her money for the party. So that's what this was about. She had asked her brother to mediate, typical Nelda, using every resource at her disposal to get what she wants. I didn't say I didn't want to. I said I'd send her what she needed. But not money? His voice was tinged with slight irritation. Zimmer, your sister is 32 years old. She makes enough money to throw a party without my help. That's not the point. She's just upset that you don't trust her. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation. Don't trust her? After she cheated me out of tens of thousands of dollars? But there was no point in arguing. Zimmer always took his sister's side. Tell her I'll send the package tomorrow, I said, changing the subject. How are Zoe and Archie? Fine. Zoe got a promotion at the bank. She's working a lot. Archie's into chemistry. He's always blowing things up in the garage. It would be great to see him. Maybe you could come over for dinner this weekend? Another pause. I could practically see him mentally scanning his busy calendar, looking for a reason to decline. I don't think I can, Mom. Archie has a swimming competition, and Zoe and I have a company party. I understand. Maybe another time, I replied, swallowing my disappointment. There wouldn't be another time. We both knew that. After the call, I returned to my task with renewed determination. A few more items went into the box. A knitted sweater I had made for Nelda when she went to college, a book of poems that Harold and I had read to the children before bedtime, a silver locket given to me by my mother to pass on to my daughter when she became a mother herself, which had not yet happened. Last, I added a recent photo, the only one of us all together in the last 5 years. It was last year's Christmas dinner, hosted by Zimmer and Zoe at their new house. In the picture, I'm sitting a little apart from the others. Nelda is talking enthusiastically, gesturing with her hands. Zimmer is looking at his phone. Zoe is smiling politely, but her eyes betray her boredom. Only Archie is sitting next to me, leaning against my shoulder and smiling sincerely at the camera. The photo perfectly illustrated our family's current situation. We were physically together but emotionally divided. Each of us was in our own world, connected only by the thin threads of a shared surname and rare meetings out of obligation. After finishing packing the box, I went downstairs to make tea. There was a notebook on the kitchen table. I always preferred to write important things by hand rather than on my phone. Flipping through the pages of recipes and to-do lists, I found a blank sheet and began to write a letter to my daughter. The words didn't come easily. I didn't want to blame or reproach her. That would only push her further away. But I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. In the end, I decided to be completely honest. Dear Nelda, I began. Instead of a check, I am sending you this box. It contains items that tell the story of our family. A story that I think you have forgotten. Every item here has meaning and significance. I hope they will help you remember who we really are to each other. I wrote for a long time, stopping, rereading, crossing things out, and starting over. It was perhaps the most important letter of my life. When I finished, I folded the sheets of paper and placed the envelope on top of the items in the box. It was late, so I decided to wait until morning to pack it. Pouring myself a glass of wine, a small indulgence I allowed myself on particularly difficult days, I settled into a chair by the window. Rain drizzled outside, blurring the lights of the neighboring houses. How strange life is, I thought. We raise children, investing everything we have in them, time, energy, love. And then they leave, and all you can do is hope that they take with them at least some of the values you tried to instill in them. My phone vibrated again, a message from Nelda. So what about the money, Mom? The party is on Friday. I need to know for sure. I didn't reply. She'd get her answer tomorrow. I finished my wine and went to bed, feeling strangely relieved, as if I'd shed a burden I'd been carrying for too long. In the morning, I finished packing the box, wrapping it carefully in mailing paper and addressing it to Nelda in Seattle. But instead of mailing the package, I decided to deliver it myself. It would take all day, 2 hours to Seattle and 2 back, but I felt I had to do it myself. As I was getting ready to leave, I heard the doorbell ring. Standing on the doorstep was Zoe, Zimmer's wife, which was unusual in itself. "Hello, Magina," she said, making no attempt to hug me or even shake my hand. "May I come in?" Zoe always looked impeccable. Pastel cashmere sweaters, pearls around her neck, low-heeled shoes. Now she was wearing a light gray coat and a silk scarf that accentuated her porcelain skin and dark hair. At 40, she looked 35 and worked hard to maintain that illusion. "Of course, come in," I said, letting her into the house, wondering why she had come. Zoe walked into the living room, casting a quick, appraising glance at the old furniture and worn carpet. Her own home was decorated in a fashionable minimalist style, lots of white, glass, and chrome. "Zimmer said you and Nelda have some kind of disagreement about money," she began without preamble, sitting down on the edge of the sofa. "I wouldn't call it a disagreement. I just decided not to send her any money this time." "Why?" Zoe raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "You always helped her before." "Maybe that's the problem. I've been enabling her for too long." Zoe tilted her head slightly, studying me with new interest. "To be honest, I'm surprised. But maybe you're right. It's about time Nelda learned to live within her means." That was unexpected. I had always assumed that Zoe disapproved of me and my parenting methods, although perhaps her dislike of Nelda outweighed her dislike of me. "I was just about to take something to her," I said, nodding toward a packed box by the door. "To Seattle? Alone? At your age?" Her voice was filled with undisguised doubt about my abilities. "I'm 67, Zoe, not 97. I can drive just fine," she shrugged. "Whatever you say. I just wouldn't want Zimmer to have to leave work if something happened." There it was, the true face of her concern. Not for me, but for me not becoming a burden on her husband. "I'll be fine," I replied dryly. "Anything else?" Zoe hesitated, as if weighing whether to continue. "Actually, yes. Archie asked if he could stay with you next weekend. Zimmer and I have a conference in Portland." So that was it. She needed a free babysitter. "Of course I'd love to have Archie," I replied sincerely, deciding to ignore her motives. After all, it gave me a chance to spend time with my grandson. "Great," Zoe said, standing up and fixing her immaculate hair. "We'll bring him over on Friday evening." She headed for the door but paused at the threshold. "What's in the box?" "Memories," I replied simply. Zoe shrugged, clearly uninterested in the details. "Have a good trip." After she left, I loaded the box into the car and set off. The road to Seattle was familiar. I had driven it dozens of times to visit my daughter. These visits usually left me with mixed feelings, the joy of seeing her and the sadness of realizing how much we had grown apart. As I drove, I often thought about the past, about how little Nelda used to demand that I check her closet for monsters before she went to bed, how she cried on my shoulder as a teenager over her first broken heart, how I helped her pack for college, trying to hide my tears of pride and sadness. What had gone wrong? When did she stop seeing me as a person and start seeing me as an ATM? Maybe it was my fault. I gave too much without asking for anything in return. Or maybe it was just part of a bigger picture, where family ties are weakening under the pressure of modern life. The rain intensified as I entered the suburbs of Seattle. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the streams of water on the windshield. The navigation system showed that Nelda's apartment was less than half an hour away. I felt a sudden rush of excitement. What if my plan didn't work? What if this box only widened the gap between us? But it was too late to back out. I had already made my decision and had to see it through. After all, sometimes it takes a little earthquake to restore the foundation of a relationship. Nelda's house was a modern apartment complex with underground parking and a concierge in the lobby. Not exactly the place to raise children, but perfect for a young single woman building a career. I parked and took the box from the back seat, protecting it from the rain with my coat. In the lobby, the concierge, a young man with a neatly trimmed beard, looked at me with polite curiosity. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Nelda Frost, apartment 312. I'm her mother." He checked something on his computer. "Miss Frost isn't home right now. Would you like to leave it for her?" I hesitated a little. Part of me wanted to see my daughter's reaction to the gift. But maybe it was better this way. She would have time to examine the contents of the box alone, without the pressure of my presence. Yes, please, it's important. Don't worry, I'll make sure she gets it, the concierge assured me as he took the box. I thanked him and stepped back out into the rain, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. The deed was done. Now all I had to do was wait for Nelda's reaction. Rain drummed on the roof of my old Toyota as I pulled onto the highway connecting Colville to Seattle. The steady sound of raindrops and the rhythmic movement of the windshield wipers had a calming effect. The heavy box of memories and evidence lay on the passenger seat, securely fastened with a seatbelt, as if it were an important passenger. I used to love long drives. They gave me a chance to collect my thoughts and enjoy the solitude. When the children were young, the silence in the car seemed like a luxury. Now, when silence filled my whole life, even the radio kept me company. I turned it on, catching the middle of an old song that Harold and I had danced to at our wedding. It's funny how some melodies become forever linked to certain moments, becoming keys to long-locked memories. The wet landscapes of Washington flashed by outside the window, thick forests, hills, and scattered farms. Nothing had changed in the last 30 years, and yet everything had changed. This road used to feel like an adventure. Now it was just a distance to be covered. Traffic became heavier as we approached Seattle. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, watching the road closely. Lately, I had noticed that it was harder to concentrate in heavy traffic, especially in the rain. Another small reminder of age which was inexorably taking its toll. My thoughts returned to the box and its contents. Was I being too harsh? Would this push Nelda further away? Maybe I should have just sent her the check she asked for and kept up the appearance of peace? But these doubts quickly gave way to certainty. Sometimes you have to inflict a little pain to prevent a lot of pain, like lancing a boil to heal it. My daughter had to understand that money wasn't the only form of relationship between parents and children. The 3-hour drive flew by. Downtown Seattle greeted me with a solid wall of rain and the gleaming glass facades of skyscrapers. The neighborhood where Nelda lived was a typical young professional enclave, with trendy coffee shops, organic grocery stores, and yoga studios. Her apartment complex, pretentiously named Moon Bay, stood out for its modern architecture and well-manicured flower beds. I parked in the guest parking lot, took out the box, covered it with my jacket to protect it from the rain, and headed for the entrance. In the spacious lobby with marble floors and live plants in pots, a young concierge with a neatly trimmed beard was on duty. He looked up from his phone when I approached the desk. "How can I help you?" he asked with a professional smile. "Hello, I'm here to see Nelda Frost, apartment 512. I'm her mother," I replied, trying to sound confident. The concierge checked something on his computer and shook his head. "Miss Frost is not home right now. Would you like me to leave a message for her when she returns?" This was unexpected. I looked at my watch. It was 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. Nelda usually worked from home on Wednesdays. She had told me so herself. Maybe her schedule had changed, or maybe she had simply lied about her schedule to avoid my visits. "Can I leave a package for her?" I asked, nodding toward the box. "Of course. I'll make sure she gets it," the concierge assured me, taking the box. "Are you sure you don't want to wait? Miss Frost usually comes back around 6. I thought about it for a moment. 4 hours of waiting in an unfamiliar place, in the rain, with no guarantee that Nelda would actually show up at 6. Besides, it might be easier for her to open the box alone without the pressure of my presence. "No, thank you. I still have things to do in town," I lied. "Just tell her mother stopped by." The concierge nodded and made a note in the log. Certainly, as I left the building, I felt a strange sense of relief. The first step had been taken, and there was no turning back. Now everything depended on Nelda's reaction. Perhaps I was worrying for nothing. Maybe she would just laugh at my sentimentality, throw away the documents, and forget all about it. But deep down, I hoped that at least something in that box would make her think. The rain had eased a little, turning into a light drizzle. I decided not to rush home and take a walk along the waterfront. Even in this weather, there were many people there. Joggers in bright raincoats, tourists with umbrellas, office workers rushing to lunch. Life was bustling around me, reminding me how quiet and empty my little world in Colville had become. I found a cafe overlooking the bay, ordered tea, and settled by the window, watching the ships in the harbor. Seattle had always seemed too noisy, too fast, too young a city to me. But now I understood its appeal to Nelda, the endless possibilities, the anonymity, the freedom from the past. Harold had dreamed of traveling after retirement. We made lists of places we wanted to visit and saved money for the big trip. His sudden death put an end to those plans. I never got to see the Grand Canyon, Paris, Athens, all the places we studied in guidebooks. For the first few years after he was gone, I couldn't even think about traveling. It was too painful to imagine myself alone in places where we were supposed to be together. And then somehow, the time for adventure passed. I immersed myself in routine, in taking care of the house, in rare visits from my children. Maybe it was time to change that? To start a new chapter while I still had the strength and health? Finishing my tea, I went outside. The rain had completely stopped, and rays of sunshine were breaking through the clouds. I decided to walk a little more before heading home. The city was beautiful in this special post-storm light. The wet streets glistened, the colors seemed brighter, and the air was fresher. Passing a bookstore, I noticed a book on travel for people over 60 in the window. It seemed like a sign. I went inside and bought it, feeling a slight excitement, as if I were committing a small act of rebellion against my orderly life. When I returned to my car, it was already around 4 o'clock. If I left now, I would be home before dark. I needed to stop at the supermarket on the way home. The refrigerator was empty, and dinner alone was quite sad enough without an empty stomach. The large supermarket on the outskirts of Colville was my usual stop. I knew where everything was, often ran into people I knew, and the cashier, Betty, always asked how I was doing. It was a small island of stability in my life. I had almost finished shopping when I heard a familiar voice. "Grandma, is that you?" I turned around and saw Archie, my only grandson, Zimmer and Zoe's son. At 13, he was almost as tall as me, but his childish smile and freckles made his face still boyish. "Archie, what a surprise!" I couldn't contain my genuine joy. "What are you doing here all alone?" "I'm not alone, I'm with Mom," he nodded toward the cosmetics department. "She's always hanging out there. I told her I'd go look at the comics." Archie rolled his eyes in such a typical teenage way that I couldn't help but smile. Despite his age, he always found time for his old grandmother, unlike his father and aunt, for whom I seemed to exist only when they needed me. "I haven't seen you in ages. How's school? Still into chemistry?" Archie's face lit up. "Yes. Mr. Jenkins gave me an extra project on organic synthesis. It's so cool, Grandma. I'm creating my own compounds and—" He continued talking about his project, using terms I barely understood, but his enthusiasm was contagious. I hung on his every word, enjoying this moment of closeness that was so lacking in my life. "Where have you been?" he asked suddenly, noticing my travel bag in the cart. "Traveling?" "I went to visit your Aunt Nelda in Seattle," I replied, watching his reaction. Archie frowned slightly. "Because of her party?" "You know about the party?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah. Mom and Dad were talking about it yesterday. Mom wasn't happy." Archie lowered his voice, imitating Zoe's tone. "Just think. Asking your mother for money for a party for a promotion she didn't get." I froze. "What do you mean, didn't get it?" Archie shrugged. "I'm not sure, but Mom told Dad that Aunt Nelda lied about the promotion. She's kind of trying to impress her new boyfriend and his friends by throwing a fancy party, but she's actually having problems at work." The news hit me like a slap in the face. So Nelda had not only asked for money for empty bragging, but she had also lied about the reason. And I thought that at least her professional successes were real. "Are you sure you understood correctly?" I asked, still hoping that this was some kind of misunderstanding. "Yeah, Mom also said—" Archie suddenly stopped, as if remembering something unpleasant. "What did your mom say?" I gently prodded him. He shifted from foot to foot, clearly feeling uncomfortable. "It doesn't matter. Just adult stuff." "Archie, please. I need to know." He sighed. "Mom said that Aunt Nelda calls you, well, her personal ATM. That you always give her money if she pushes you hard enough. Dad got angry and said it was disrespectful, but then they started arguing about something else. Sorry, Grandma." I felt the color drain from my face. Personal ATM. That's how my own daughter saw me. Not as a mother who had always supported her, not as a person with feelings and a life of her own, just a source of funding for her whims. Hey, are you okay? Archie asked, concerned, noticing my reaction. I forced myself to smile. Yes, dear, just a little tired from the trip. Archie, there you are, Zoe's sharp voice rang out. She was walking quickly toward us, carrying several bags from the cosmetics department. I told you to wait for me at the checkout. Sorry, Mom. I ran into Grandma and… Hello, Zoe, I interrupted, not letting him explain. Zoe looked slightly annoyed by this unexpected encounter. Maggie, I didn't know you were in town today. Zimmer said you went to Seattle. I'm back, I replied curtly. I brought Nelda a little gift. Something flashed in Zoe's eyes. Curiosity, concern, but she quickly regained her neutral expression. I hope the drive was okay. It's been raining for a week, she said, clearly trying to steer the conversation in a safe direction. It was fine. Archie was just telling me about his chemistry project. Looks like we have a scientist in the making. Zoe's face softened a little at the mention of her son. Yes, he's always mixing things in the garage. Zimmer set up a little lab for him. That's great. It's important to encourage that kind of interest. An awkward pause hung between us. Archie glanced from me to his mother, sensing the tension. We have to go, Zoe finally said. It was nice to see you, Maggie. Don't forget we're bringing Archie over on Friday. I can't wait, I replied sincerely, smiling at my grandson. Bye, Grandma. I'll bring my new experiments to show you, Archie exclaimed before Zoe pulled him toward the checkout. I watched them go, digesting the information I had received from my grandson. So Nelda had lied about the promotion. She had lied about the reason for the party, and behind my back, she had called me her personal ATM. Each of these revelations was painful, but together they formed a picture that I had refused to see for too long. Finishing my shopping, I walked slowly to my car, thinking about what I had learned. Part of me wanted to call Nelda immediately and demand an explanation. Another part of me knew it was pointless. She would just talk her way out of it, as she always did. It would be better to wait for her reaction to the box. Maybe being confronted with the physical evidence of her deception would make her think twice. The drive home seemed longer than usual. I turned on the radio but couldn't concentrate on the music or the news. My thoughts kept returning to Archie's words and the box left in Seattle. Had I been too naive all these years? Too blinded by maternal love? Or had I simply refused to accept the truth because it was too painful? Colville greeted me with the familiar quiet of a small town. Driving through the familiar streets, I felt a strange sense of alienation, as if I were looking at my life from the outside. This house, this town, this relationship with my children, it all seemed like part of some other reality that I had been living in for too long out of habit. It was evening when I finally parked near my house. Taking the groceries out of the trunk, I paused for a moment looking at the dark windows. No one was waiting for me inside. No one would ask how my trip had been. No one would help me unload the groceries. But for the first time in a long time, this loneliness didn't seem so overwhelming. Maybe it was because I had finally taken some action instead of just waiting for my children's attention. Maybe it was because meeting Archie had reminded me that there were still bright moments in my life. Or maybe it was because somewhere in Seattle, Nelda would soon receive my box, and our relationship would never be the same again, for better or for worse. I opened the door and entered the house, flipping the light switch. I had another night of waiting ahead of me before I would find out how my daughter would react to my unusual gift. The next morning, I woke up to the ringing of the phone. It was 6:30 a.m., too early for a normal call. My heart sank. The only time someone called at that hour was to deliver bad news. Hello? I muttered sleepily. What does this mean? Nelda's voice was tense. I knew immediately that she had received the box. My sleepiness vanished instantly, but I forced myself to speak calmly. Good morning, Nelda. It's good to hear your voice. Don't you dare talk to me like that. What kind of junk did you send me? I sat up in bed and took a deep breath. So that's how she saw our family heirlooms and memories. As junk. Not surprising, but still hurtful. It's not junk, Nelda. It's our history. Your history. I asked for money, not a sentimental trip down memory lane. Why did you do this? To humiliate me? I could hear tears in her voice. Not tears of remorse or understanding, but tears of anger and wounded pride. I closed my eyes, trying to picture her now, probably sitting among the photos and letters scattered across the floor, holding the very documents that proved her deception. I didn't want to humiliate you, dear. I wanted you to remember who we are to each other, that we're not just a source of money and its recipient. You went through my things. Those documents. You had no right. So she had gotten to the part of the box where the evidence of her lies about the money for treatment was. The papers I had accidentally found in her bag during my last visit. Receipts, bills, credit card statements. Everything pointed to the fact that the money that was supposedly invested through her financier friend had actually gone toward a new car and a vacation in Hawaii. That was my money, Nelda. Money I had saved for my treatment. I had a right to know where it went. A short pause. Then her voice, now quieter. I was going to pay it back, I swear. I just needed a little time. 2 years have passed, dear. In that time, I haven't heard a single word of truth. Just stories about a crooked financier who supposedly disappeared with the money. I couldn't tell you the truth. You would have been disappointed in me. The first hint of sincerity in her voice. Perhaps all was not lost. I'm not disappointed that you spent the money, Nelda. I'm disappointed that you lied. And you're still lying. Like now. There's no promotion, is there? And the party isn't for your colleagues. Another pause, a longer one. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Who told you? She finally asked. Is it true? Who told you? She repeated emphatically. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you lied to me again. I heard the rustling of papers, as if she were rummaging through the contents of the box. I can't believe you kept all these old things. My college sweater? Seriously. An attempt to change the subject. Typical Nelda, avoiding uncomfortable conversations. I kept everything related to you and your brother, all the traces of your growing up, all the memorable moments, because they're precious to me, Nelda, just like you are. I heard a quiet sob, quickly suppressed. Then her voice suddenly harsh. You know what? I'll come over today. We need to talk in person. I'll be waiting, I replied, feeling both anxious and relieved. At least she hadn't just dismissed the box. Something had hit Nelda hard enough to make her drive 3 hours to talk to me. And yes, I really didn't get a raise, she added before hanging up. I'm barely holding on to my job. After the call, I couldn't sit still. My nervous energy needed an outlet. I cleaned the house, even though it was already clean, made a lunch I was unlikely to eat, and even started baking an apple pie, Nelda's favorite dessert since childhood. Working with my hands always helped me calm my thoughts. Nelda didn't say exactly when she would arrive, so every sound of a passing car made me jump. I tried to mentally prepare myself for the upcoming conversation, but I couldn't concentrate. What would I say to her? What would she say to me? Would we be able to bridge the gap between us, or had the box only made things worse? Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Looking out the window, I saw Nelda's blue sedan. Too expensive for her salary, as I now realized. She sat behind the wheel for a few seconds, as if gathering her courage, then got out decisively and headed for the door. I opened it before she knocked. Nelda stood on the threshold, a beautiful 32-year-old woman with red hair pulled back in a messy bun and tired, red eyes. She was holding that box in her hands. Hi, Mom, she said quietly. Hello, dear. Come in. She entered the house, placed the box on the coffee table, and looked around as if she were seeing the place where she grew up for the first time. Perhaps that was the case. We often fail to notice the things that are closest and most familiar to us. Tea? Coffee? I baked an apple pie, I offered, trying to ease the tension. Nothing, thank you. She shook her head. Let's just talk. We sat down in the living room, me in my usual chair, her on the sofa opposite. Between us, like a physical embodiment of our problems, stood the box. Why did you do this? Nelda began, gesturing toward the box. Her voice sounded tired, without the morning anger. Because you asked for money, but you didn't ask me. I replied simply. Because I'm tired of being an ATM for my children. She flinched at the word ATM, apparently remembering that she had used it herself when talking about me. I don't, I don't think of you as an ATM, she said unconvincingly. No? What else would you call a relationship where you only contact me when you need money? When was the last time you called just to see how I was? Nelda opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. She couldn't remember. Listen, Mom, I'm going through a difficult time. I'm not avoiding you on purpose. It's just work, stress, my personal life. I have a life too, Nelda, and it doesn't consist of waiting for my children to deign to remember I exist. Those words finally broke through her defenses. Nelda lowered her gaze, fingering the edge of her blouse, a habit she had picked up as a child when she felt guilty. I know I wasn't the best daughter, but you have no idea how hard it is. So tell me, I suggested gently. Tell me what's really going on. She took a deep breath, as if making an important decision. I lost my job 3 months ago. Actually, I was demoted to assistant on probation. After that project, I messed up. This was unexpected. In our last conversation, she had assured me that her career was on the rise. Why didn't you tell me? I was ashamed. You've always been so proud of my achievements. How could I admit that I lost everything because of my own stupidity? I reached out and touched her knee. I'm not proud of your achievements, Nelda. I'm proud of you, regardless of your job title or salary. Her eyes filled with tears. Really? Even after what I did with the money for your treatment? Even after that. Although I admit, it hurt. Nelda nodded, wiping away her tears. I was going to pay it back, I swear. But then things went wrong. Brad left, taking half the things we bought together. Then there were problems at work, and then the debts started piling up like a snowball. Debts? I asked, feeling a chill inside. What kind of debts? She looked down again. Credit cards, car loan, rent arrears. I've been living on minimum wage for 3 months trying to maintain the same lifestyle. It's impossible. Now a lot of things were becoming clear. Her persistent requests for money, the lies about a promotion, the plans for a party that was supposed to create the illusion of success. How much do you owe? I asked bluntly. Nelda named a sum that made me gasp. It was more than I could imagine. Much more than I could give her without jeopardizing my own future. How is that even possible? I muttered. In installments, she smiled bitterly. First a little here, a little there. Then you start taking out new loans to pay off the old ones. And before you know it, you're up to your ears in debt with no idea how you got there. I looked at my daughter, trying to see in this tormented woman the bright, confident girl she once was. What had gone wrong? Where did I fail as a mother? That money you asked for the party, I began. It wasn't for the party, Nelda interrupted. I'm being evicted if I don't pay 3 months' rent by the end of the week. And you decided not to tell me the truth, but to make up a story about a party? I didn't want you to know how bad things were. I'm 32 years old, Mom. I have to solve my own problems, not run to Mommy every time something goes wrong. But you still came for the money. She winced at the words, but didn't deny the obvious. Yes, because I have nowhere else to go. Zimmer already turned me down. He and Zoe have a mortgage and expenses for Archie, and I'm on the edge. I stood up and walked over to the window, trying to collect my thoughts. Outside, the familiar rain was drizzling, turning the world into a blurry gray canvas. It was so similar to our situation. Everything that had seemed clear and understandable had been distorted by lies and half-truths. You should have told me the truth, Nelda, from the very beginning. What difference would it have made? You couldn't have given me that kind of money anyway. It's not about the money. It's about trust, about respect, about the fact that relationships between parents and children should be based on more than financial support. I returned to my chair and sat down again, looking my daughter straight in the eyes. I can't give you that much money, Nelda, but I can help you find a way out. What way out? Bankruptcy? Moving back in with you? Her voice was bitter. If you need to, yes, you can always come home. But first, we need to figure out what led to this situation. Why are you living beyond your means? Why are you hiding your problems instead of solving them? Nelda was silent, but I could see that my words had hit home. Behind the mask of resentment and defensive aggression, I saw the face of a frightened woman who had lost control of her life. "I'm scared, Mom," she finally whispered. "I'm afraid that everyone will find out what a failure I really am. That behind this facade of a successful career woman is a confused, frightened little girl who has no idea what she's doing." Those words broke my heart. I moved over to the sofa next to her and put my arms around her shoulders. She didn't resist, but she didn't move closer either, as if she had forgotten how to. "You're not a failure, dear. You're just a person who makes mistakes, like all of us. But my mistakes cost you money for treatment. And now I've come back to ask for help again, when I promised myself I'd never do that again." I gently turned her face toward me. "Listen to me, Nelda. I'll help you with the rent. Not the whole amount, but enough to buy some time. And then we'll figure out how to solve the rest of your problems together. But I want you to promise me one thing." "What?" "No more lies, no more secrets. If you have a problem, come and talk to me. Don't make up stories about parties or promotions. I'm your mother, not an investor who needs to be impressed with reports of non-existent successes." Nelda nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I saw sincerity in her eyes. "I'll try," she said quietly. "And one more thing," I added. "You need to learn to live within your means. No more designer clothes, vacations you can't afford, restaurants that are out of your budget. Reality, Nelda. It's time to face it head on." She sighed. "I know. It's hard. All my friends, my social circle, everything is built around a certain lifestyle. If I suddenly become normal, what will be left of me? You'll be left with yourself. The real you, smart, creative, strong. Isn't that enough?" Nelda didn't answer, but I could see she was thinking about what I said. We sat in silence as it gradually grew dark outside. Finally, she took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you for not turning your back on me, Mom, even after everything I've done. I'll never turn my back on you, sweetheart, no matter what happens." We talked for a long time that evening, more openly than we had in years. Nelda told me about her fears and failures, about how she had tried to maintain the illusion of success by spending money she didn't have. She talked about how loneliness and the need for recognition had pushed her into increasingly risky financial decisions. I listened without judging, but also without excusing. Sometimes love means not blindly accepting all mistakes, but helping to correct them. And right now, my daughter needed exactly that kind of love: firm, guiding, but unconditional. When it was time for dinner, we set the table together for the first time in many years. The apple pie I baked became a symbolic dessert of reconciliation. Not everything had been resolved yet, not all wounds had healed, but we had taken the first step toward rebuilding our relationship. After dinner, Nelda returned to the box. She carefully took out the children's drawings, school notebooks, and photographs. Now she looked at them with different eyes, not with irritation at sentimental junk, but with the quiet thoughtfulness of someone rediscovering their past. "I forgot how happy our family was," she said, looking at a picture of the four of us. Me, Harold, her, and Zimmer, standing by the lake smiling at the camera. "We can be happy again, Nelda. Different, but no less sincere." She nodded, carefully returning the photo to the box. "I want to try, Mom, I really do." When she was ready to leave, it was already late at night. I offered to let her stay, but she shook her head. She had to get back to Seattle by morning so she wouldn't be late for work. I gave her a check, not for the entire amount she owed me, but enough to cover her most pressing needs. It wasn't just financial support, it was a gesture of trust. I believed that this time she would use the money for what it was intended. At the door we hugged, a real tight hug, the kind we hadn't shared since she was a teenager. "I love you, Mom," she said quietly. "And I'm so sorry." "I love you too, sweetie. I always have and always will." I stood on the porch until her car disappeared around the corner. Talking to Nelda left me emotionally drained, but at the same time I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if a heavy burden I had been carrying for years had become a little lighter. When I returned to the house, I noticed that Nelda had left one of the photos on the table, the one with the 4-year-old red-haired girl sitting on her father's shoulders. I picked up the picture and gazed at the happy face of my child. Perhaps this was the girl I had been searching for all these years. And perhaps today I saw a glimpse of her in the eyes of a grown woman who had finally found the strength to be honest. 3 weeks have passed since Nelda's visit. In the evening, I sat in my chair by the window, sorting through papers and planning my next steps. My conversation with my daughter changed not only our relationship, but also me. It was as if a door I had long forgotten about had been opened. After Nelda left, I thought a lot about how we had reached this point, when loved ones become almost strangers, and communication is reduced to requests for money and routine calls on holidays. I came to a disappointing conclusion. I was also responsible for this. For years, I allowed my children to treat me like an ATM and a free babysitter, without asking for anything in return. I was afraid of their rejection, afraid of losing even the crumbs of attention I received. And as a result, I got exactly what I feared: a formal relationship without any real closeness. But that would not happen again. The letter lying in front of me was addressed to a real estate agent. I had decided to sell the house. Too big for one person, too full of memories that no longer warmed me, but only reopened old wounds. Instead, I planned to buy a small apartment in the center of Colville, closer to the library and the park, where I could start a new chapter in my life. The decision was not easy. 30 years of my life had been spent in this house. My children had grown up here. Harold and I had built our family here, and I had mourned his passing here. Every room held stories, happy and sad, meaningful and mundane. But sometimes you have to let go of the past to make room for the future. Another envelope contained a letter to the bank with instructions for restructuring my savings. I set aside a certain amount to help Nelda with her debts. Not all of it, but enough to get her out of the deepest hole. The rest was divided into several funds. One for my own needs, including medical expenses, one for the trips I had dreamed of for so long, and a small trust fund for Archie's education. No more thoughtless checks on demand. No more ATMs. My support would now have clear boundaries and specific goals. This wasn't stinginess, but an act of love. Real love that helps people grow, not preserves dependence. My phone vibrated, interrupting my thoughts. It was Zimmer. "Mom, is it true? Are you selling the house?" he asked without even saying hello. So the realtor had already contacted him. I had specifically asked to inform my children about the upcoming sale so that they would hear the news from me and not from random acquaintances. "Hello, Zimmer. Yes, it's true." "But why? Where are you going to move? You can't just sell the house." There was genuine indignation in his voice. I wondered what had upset him more: concern for me or anxiety about losing his inheritance. "I've already found a lovely apartment in the center. 2 bedrooms, a sunny living room, a small balcony for my flowers, and most importantly, no stairs. At my age, that's important." "But this is our family home. Everything here is connected to Dad." "Your father isn't in these walls, Zimmer. He's in our hearts and our memories. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life looking after a house that hardly anyone ever visits." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing heavily. "Is this because of Nelda? Because of her debts?" "No, dear, it's because of me. I want to change my life while I still can. I want to travel, see my friends, maybe even take some classes. A big house is a lot of work." He was clearly not convinced. "What about your things? There's so much stuff there." "I'll take the essentials and the things that are dear to my heart. The rest, maybe you and Nelda would like to take something for yourselves? Come over and have a look." "Okay," he agreed reluctantly. "Zoe and I will come by on the weekend." Speaking of the weekend, Archie asked if he could stay with you on Saturday night. "It's our wedding anniversary, and we'd like to spend the evening together." Some things never change, I thought. But at least time with Archie was always a pleasure, not a chore. "Of course, I'd love to. And Zimmer, I was thinking of having a family dinner next Sunday. You, Zoe, Archie, and Nelda. A last dinner in this house before it's sold." "Okay, Mom. I'll tell Zoe and Nelda. Will you talk to her yourself?" "Yes, I'll give her a call." After the call, I drank my tea, watching the sun go down. Zimmer's reaction was predictable. First shock, then disbelief, then reluctant acceptance. He had always been more concerned with stability than change. But change was exactly what I needed right now. The next day, I called Nelda. After our conversation 3 weeks ago, we had been in touch more often. calling each other every few days to discuss her progress in paying off her debts and her plans for the future. These were still cautious, sometimes strained conversations, but there was a new note in them: sincerity. "I'm selling the house," I said after exchanging greetings. Unlike my conversation with Zimmer, I decided not to beat around the bush. "What? Seriously?" Her voice sounded surprised, but not upset. "Where are you going to move?" I told her about the apartment I had found, its advantages, and how the move would simplify my life. That sounds reasonable," Nelda said thoughtfully. "It's about time you thought about yourself and not just us." This admission, so simple and yet so meaningful, touched me deeply. Perhaps our difficult conversation had really changed something. "Thank you, dear. And one more thing, I want to have a family dinner next Sunday. The last one in this house. Can you come?" A short pause. "Yes, I think I can. It's important to you, isn't it?" "Very," I replied simply. "Then I'll be there," she promised. The next few days flew by in a flurry of activity. I met with the real estate agent, signed papers, and began to sort through my belongings little by little. Every item required a decision: take it with me, give it to the children, donate it, or throw it away. It was like an inventory not only of my home, but of my life. On Saturday, Zimmer and Zoe arrived with Archie and began looking around the house, choosing things they wanted to take. Zoe immediately set her sights on an antique dinner service that I had inherited from my mother. Zimmer was interested in Harold's old vinyl records and his collection of pipes. "What will happen to everything else?" Zoe asked, glancing around the living room. "I'll take some things with me and donate the rest to charity," I replied. A new life means a new environment. "Grandma, can I take Grandpa's telescope?" Archie asked timidly, pointing to the old astronomical instrument gathering dust in the corner of the study. "Of course, dear. Your grandfather would be delighted that you're interested in astronomy." The boy's face lit up with a smile. "Cool! I've wanted to go stargazing for a long time. We're going to have an astronomy project at school next semester." Zimmer and Zoe left in the evening, leaving Archie with me. We made pizza, watched an old movie, and then sat in the backyard for a long time, looking at the stars through his grandfather's telescope. Archie asked questions about the constellations, the planets, and what his grandparents were like when they were young. "Aren't you afraid of living alone in your new apartment?" he asked suddenly. "No, dear. I've never been afraid of being alone, only of emptiness in relationships with people I love." He nodded thoughtfully, surprisingly mature for a 13-year-old. "I'll come visit you in your new apartment, I promise." I hugged him around the shoulders, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "Thank you, Archie. That means a lot to me." In the morning, I drove him home and spent the rest of the day preparing for tomorrow's dinner. I decided to make all our family favorites: my mother's roast, the potato gratin that Harold loved, the cranberry and walnut salad that the kids loved, and of course, blueberry pie for dessert. Cooking always calmed me down and allowed me to organize my thoughts. I thought about the upcoming evening and how our relationship had changed over the past month. Nelda had become more open and had begun to gradually deal with her debts. Zimmer, although unhappy about selling the house, began to call more often and take an interest in my plans. And I finally felt like I was not just an appendage to their lives, but a person with my own desires and rights. Sunday dawned clear and sunny, as if nature itself was blessing my new beginnings. I set the table in the dining room, which we had hardly used in recent years. Tablecloth, china, silver cutlery, crystal glasses. It wasn't just dinner, but a symbolic transition from one chapter of life to another. Nelda arrived first, with a bouquet of wildflowers and a bottle of wine. She looked better than when we last met, less tense, more composed. "The house looks just as I remember it," she said, looking around. "Even the smell is the same: cinnamon and lavender." "That will change soon," I replied, accepting the flowers. "In 2 weeks, other people will be living here with their own smells and stories. Aren't you sad?" "A little, but mostly I feel liberated." She nodded understandingly, helping me put the flowers in a vase. "I started bankruptcy proceedings," she said suddenly, "and I found a cheaper apartment. I'm moving next month." "That's a big step, Nelda. I'm proud of you." "It's hard," she admitted. admitting my mistakes, starting over from scratch. But you were right, it's time to face reality head on. Zimmer, Zoe, and Archie arrived half an hour later. Zoe looked flawless as always, but her smile seemed more genuine than usual. Perhaps my decision to sell the house and stop being a permanent resource for the whole family had changed her attitude toward me a little. That smells delicious, Archie exclaimed, sniffing the air. Grandma's special pie? Of course, dear, and everything else you love. We sat down at the table, the first time in a long time that the whole family was together, without excuses or rushing around. At first, the conversation was awkward. Too much was left unsaid. But gradually, with the help of wine and delicious food, the atmosphere began to warm up. So, an apartment in the city center, Zimmer began, helping himself to a second helping of roast. What are you going to do with all the free time you'll have without having to worry about the house? Travel, I replied. Harold and I always dreamed of seeing the world. Now I'll do it for both of us. Travel? Alone? Zoe didn't hide her surprise. Why not? I'm quite independent, and there are group tours for people my age. Where do you want to go first, Grandma? Archie asked with interest. Italy. I've always wanted to see Venice and Florence, and then maybe Greece or Spain. The list is long. That sounds amazing, said Nelda, and I heard genuine admiration in her voice. You deserve it, Mom. Those simple words seemed to melt the last bit of ice between us. I smiled at my daughter, feeling tears of gratitude welling up in my eyes. I have a suggestion, Zimmer said suddenly. Let's have family dinners like this regularly, once a month. Now Mom will have a new apartment, and Nelda will too. New places, new traditions. Great idea, Archie agreed. And can I stay with Grandma on the weekends like I used to? Of course, if your parents don't mind, I replied, looking at Zimmer and Zoe. We're all for it, Zoe said unexpectedly. Archie always comes back from your place looking so inspired. You have a good influence on him. It was perhaps the warmest comment I had ever heard from my sister-in-law. When we moved on to dessert, the conversation became even more relaxed. Nelda talked about her plans to look for a new job. Zimmer shared the latest news from work. And even Zoe relaxed enough to share stories about her childhood in a small town very similar to Colville. After dinner, we moved to the living room with tea and the rest of the pie. I took out some old photo albums, not the ones I had sent to Nelda in a box, but even older ones with yellowed pictures of my parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. I've never seen these photos, Archie exclaimed, looking at pictures of his great-grandfather in military uniform. That's because I haven't taken them out in a long time, I admitted. But now that I'm sorting through the house, a lot of forgotten treasures are coming to light. We spent the evening leafing through albums, telling stories, and laughing at old family jokes. Even Zoe, usually reserved and aloof, was interested in learning about the family she had married into. When it was time to say goodbye, I noticed that the atmosphere was completely different from when we had started the evening. It was as if something had shifted, begun to change. We were still not a perfect family, still carrying the scars of past hurts and misunderstandings. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a real connection between us. Nelda hugged me tighter than usual. Thanks for dinner, Mom, and for everything. Thank you for coming, dear. It means a lot to me. Zimmer hugged me too, patting me awkwardly on the back. I'm still not sure about selling the house, but I want you to be happy. And if this makes you happy, I'll support you. Even Zoe showed unusual warmth as she said goodbye. Your new apartment sounds wonderful. Maybe I can help you decorate? I have a few ideas for small spaces. I'd love to, I replied sincerely. I could use your taste. Archie was the last to hug me. I love you, Grandma. And I'm so glad you're going to travel and do cool things. You deserve to be happy. Thank you, my dear. I love you too. More than you can imagine. When everyone had left, I sat in the living room for a long time, surrounded by photographs and memories. The house seemed quiet, but not empty. It was filled with the echoes of today's conversations, laughter, moments of understanding, and reconciliation. I had no illusions. Our relationship had not become perfect in one evening. There was still a lot of work ahead, many conversations, perhaps even conflicts. But today I saw something I had almost given up hope of ever seeing, glimpses of true understanding and respect. Selling the house, moving into an apartment, setting new boundaries in my relationship with my children, these weren't just practical decisions. They were steps toward a new life, where I would not only be a mother and grandmother, but also a woman with her own dreams and plans. A woman who had finally decided to live for herself without giving up her connection to her family. In the morning, I was supposed to meet with the buyers of the house, a young couple with two small children. They seemed happy and full of plans, reminding me of Harold and me many years ago. I was glad that the house, which held so many stories of our family, would continue to be a place where new memories, new bonds, and new love would be created. And me, I was ready to start a new chapter. With a smaller house, but bigger dreams. With stronger, though not perfect, relationships with my children. With a clear understanding that it's never too late to change your life and become the person you've always dreamed of being.